The war had been a mistake from the beginning. That was what Captain Elias Corrin believed, though he had never spoken it aloud during the conflict. Soldiers who admitted doubt rarely survived long in the United Terran Confederation's navy, but deep in his heart he knew. The Terrans had not understood the Zitherans, and the Zitherans had not cared to understand humans. Both sides had been caught in a spiral of fear and mistrust, and it had ended in fire. Elias had lived that fire. He remembered the way ships tore each other apart in orbit above half-burned colonies, how civilians screamed over broken comms, and how commanding officers barked orders that made no sense when survival itself seemed impossible. He remembered most of all the day everything changed, the day he crossed a line that could never be erased. It had been on the storm world of Vera 9, a place of endless black skies and oceans that boiled with lightning storms. The Terran fleet had been ordered to blockade the system, to prevent the Zitherans from regrouping. Elias had been a young officer then, commanding a corvette with a skeleton crew. He had thought it would be a routine patrol. He had thought wrong. The distress call had cut across his comms during a storm cycle, faint but urgent. At first he thought it was human, another stranded patrol, but the language had been Zitharan, clipped and sharp, spoken in desperation. His crew had urged him to ignore it. The orders from high command were clear: no rescues, no contact, maintain the blockade. But Elias had never been good at following orders when lives were on the line. They had found her in the ruins of a broken shuttle, half buried on the cliffs above the storm sea. She was not just anyone, though Elias had not known it at the time. She was Princess Sarilith, daughter of the Zitharan High Regent, a young woman with silvered skin and eyes like molten gold. Her guards lay dead around her, their armor shredded by the crash. She had stood when Elias approached, proud even in her pain, and pointed a ceremonial blade at him with trembling hands. "Stay back." "Human," she had said, her voice raw with exhaustion. He had raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. "You're hurt. If you stay here, you'll die. Better death than chains." It had been those words more than anything that made him act. He should have left her. He should have followed orders. Instead, Elias had ordered his crew to lift her aboard, against every regulation, against the law itself. The days that followed were a blur of running, hiding, and fighting off patrols from both sides. His own people branded him a deserter. The Zitherans thought him a kidnapper. Only later would the truth emerge, that assassins from within Sarilith's own court had arranged the crash, hoping to end her line before she could ascend to power. Without Elias, she would never have survived. That act had changed the course of the war, though no one had known it then. It had planted a seed of doubt in the Zitharan High Regent's mind about the true nature of humans, and when negotiations finally came, when peace became possible, the memory of a reckless young captain who had risked everything for an enemy princess weighed heavily in the regent's decisions. But Elias had not been there to see the peace signed. He had disappeared into the shadows, stripped of his rank, cast adrift by the very fleet he had once served. To the Confederation he was a liability. To the Zitherans he was a mystery. To Sarilith he was something more, though she would never speak it aloud in those early days. Years passed. Worlds rebuilt. The fires of war cooled into uneasy peace. Elias lived in obscurity, wandering from station to station, sometimes trading, sometimes protecting those who could not protect themselves. He carried no banners, swore no oaths. He was simply a man who had once made a choice that mattered. And yet, in the high courts of the Zitharan Empire, his name was not forgotten. Sarilith had ascended to the throne after her father's passing, and with every year she ruled, she remembered. She remembered the human who had lifted her from the wreckage, who had stared down death with no hesitation, who had refused to treat her as a prize or a bargaining chip. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not as a princess, not as an alien, but as a person worth saving. In public, she was the Iron Queen, the ruler who kept her empire strong in the aftermath of war. But in the quiet hours of night, when the grand halls were empty and the stars burned beyond the palace spires, she thought of Elias. Did he still live? Had he found peace, or had his own people cast him aside for his defiance? The questions lingered like shadows she could not banish. For Elias, the memories were quieter but no less sharp. He did not think of himself as a hero. He thought only of a decision made in a storm, a decision that had cost him everything yet somehow still felt right. He remembered Sarilith's eyes, bright even through the smoke and blood. He remembered her words when they parted, whispered as if afraid the universe might hear, "You saved more than me. One day you will understand." He had never understood, not fully, but perhaps somewhere deep down he believed. And so the years passed and the galaxy moved on, but the story of a human captain and a Zitharan queen was not finished. Fate was patient, and it had a way of weaving paths together again, no matter how far they strayed. Years had passed since the war ended, but Queen Sarilith never truly escaped its shadow. From the high balconies of her palace she could see the spires of the Zitharan capital glittering in the sunlight, rebuilt and whole again. Yet behind the beauty, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing against her shoulders. She had inherited an empire that was powerful but fragile, held together by her strength and the hope of her people. Her council reminded her daily that humans could not be trusted. They whispered that Terrans were impulsive, dangerous, and too young a species to wield power. Yet every time those words reached her ears, Sarilith remembered a man who had proven them wrong. She remembered Elias Corran, the human who had once stood between her and death, who had chosen compassion over duty. She had not seen him since that day on Vera 9. The memory of his face had blurred with time, but the impression he left remained sharp. The way he had looked at her with steady defiance, the way he had risked everything without asking for reward, those things never faded. She wondered if he still lived. Humans aged quickly, far faster than her own kind, and the years that had passed might already have stolen him from the stars. The thought tightened something deep inside her chest, though she never admitted it aloud. Reports from her intelligence network filled her with questions she could not ignore. Among the rumors of smuggling, piracy, and unrest on the frontier, one name kept appearing: a Terran mercenary who had a strange code of honor, who fought not for credits, but to protect those in need. Some said he had once worn a captain's uniform. Some said he walked away from wars and thrones alike. The descriptions were inconsistent, but something about them stirred her memory. Could it be him? Her advisors told her to ignore it. "The Empire has no need for ghosts," one said. "The humans are not our concern," said another. But Sarilith had learned long ago not to silence her instincts. Against all advice, she gave a quiet order. The network was to find this man, confirm if he was truly Elias Corran. It was not long before they traced him to a distant frontier world, a place called Heron's Reach. Once it had been a mining colony, but after the war, it became a haven for refugees, traders, and wanderers who wanted to be forgotten. There, her agents reported, Elias lived simply. He was not a commander or a mercenary lord. He was a man who carried goods between settlements, who defended villagers when raiders struck, and who asked nothing in return but food, water, and silence. When the report reached Sarilith, she read it in the quiet of her chamber, her golden eyes fixed on the words. She felt an unexpected rush of relief. He was alive. He was still himself. Against reason, against time, the man who had once saved her had not vanished into dust. She knew what she must do. Not as a queen, but as Sarilith, the woman who had once stood in the wreckage of a storm world and found life where she had expected only death. She summoned her most trusted guards and ordered a discreet journey to the frontier. Her council protested, but she silenced them with the steel in her voice. "This is not politics," she told them. "This is something I must see for myself." The voyage to Heron's Reach was long, and during it she wondered how he would greet her. Would he even remember her? Would he see only the crown, the empire, the weight she carried? Or would he still see her as she had been, frightened, wounded, and yet alive because of him? She carried no answers with her, only questions and a heart that beat faster than she wished to admit. When her ship landed on the dusty plains of the frontier world, the air was sharp and dry, filled with the smell of iron from the soil. The settlement was small, built from scavenged metal and stone, but it thrived with laughter, markets, and the sound of children running through the streets. Sarilith's guards drew stares as they walked, but the settlers gave them wide space, too cautious to interfere. It was near the edge of the settlement that she saw him. Elias was older now, his face marked by years the way storms mark the land. His hair carried strands of silver, and his shoulders bore the weight of countless struggles. But his eyes, sharp, steady, unyielding, were the same. He was repairing a broken cart for a villager, his hand steady, his expression calm. Sarilith felt her breath catch. For a moment she was no queen, no ruler of millions. She was simply the woman he had once saved, seeing him again after years that felt like lifetimes. He noticed her as she approached. His gaze lifted, met hers, and narrowed slightly. Recognition flickered, though his face remained guarded. He set down his tools and stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice quiet but firm. There was no bow, no kneeling. Only the simple acknowledgement of who she was. Her guards bristled at his lack of deference, but Sarilith raised her hand to still them. She looked at him for a long moment, studying the lines time had carved into him. "It has been many years," she said softly. Elias gave a small shrug. Years change some things, not others. His words cut through her like the edge of a blade, simple and honest. She wanted to say more, but before she could, a shadow fell over the settlement. From the sky descended black shapes, ships not marked with her crest or the Terran emblem. Raiders, or worse. The settlers screamed as the vessels opened fire near the outskirts, sending plumes of dirt and smoke into the air. Without hesitation, Elias grabbed a weapon from the cart, one clearly meant for defense. His eyes were already fixed on the danger, not on her crown or her guards. "Stay behind me," he said, the same way he had years ago in the ruins of Vera 9. Sarilith's guards moved to protect her, but she found herself watching Elias instead. The way he stood firm, the way he faced danger without fear, it was as if time had folded back on itself. In that instant she remembered why she had never forgotten him. The battle erupted around them. Raiders swarmed the settlement, armed and ruthless. Elias fought with a determination that seemed larger than life, every move efficient and fierce. Sarilith saw him shield a child with his own body, drive back attackers with nothing but grit and skill, and rally terrified settlers to defend their homes. Her guards fought as well, but even they could not ignore the human at the center of it all. His defiance, his refusal to yield, drew others to him like a flame in the dark. And when the last raider ship fell back into the sky, leaving smoke and silence in its wake, it was Elias who still stood at the front. Weapon lowered but eyes sharp, he turned to her then, his voice steady but edged with exhaustion. "Your Majesty, I don't know why you came here. But whatever throne you sit on, whatever empire you rule, it doesn't matter here. Here people survive because someone stands for them." Sarilith felt the words strike deep. He was not her subject. He was not her soldier. He was Elias Koran, the human who had once risked everything for her. And though the years had passed, though the galaxy had changed, he had not. The raiders left smoke and silence in their wake. The villagers moved through the broken streets, helping one another, pulling wounded to safety and trying to put out the fires that burned near the edge of the settlement. The air smelled of scorched metal and dust, but beneath it all was the sound of survival, children crying, people calling names, the quiet sighs of those who realized they were still alive. Elias stood at the center of it all, his shoulders heavy, his breath uneven. He had fought like he always did, not because he was ordered, not because anyone paid him, but because people had needed someone to stand. His weapon hung loose in his grip, his eyes watching every shadow, ready in case the raiders returned. Queen Sarilith stood nearby, her golden eyes fixed on him. Her guards surrounded her, tense and ready, but even they could not deny what they had witnessed. The man had fought like a soldier, but more than that, he had fought like someone who refused to let others fall while he still had strength left. He had changed nothing about himself. He was exactly as she remembered. When the smoke cleared and the villagers began to rebuild, Sarilith stepped forward. "You should not have stood between me and danger," she said, her voice calm but edged with something deeper. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I would have done the same for anyone here. You're no different." Her guards stiffened, ready to rebuke his words, but Sarilith lifted her hand. She looked at him, remembering the storm world of Vera 9, the wreckage, the way he had spoken then as if crowns and empires meant nothing to him. A queen was used to people bowing, kneeling, speaking carefully. Elias did none of those things. He had never done them. "Do you still think that way?" she asked softly. "That I am no different?" "You bleed like anyone else," he said. "You risk your life when you walk into a fight just like anyone else. That's all I need to know." The words struck her harder than they should have. She had spent years ruling, years holding herself above others for the sake of her empire. But Elias refused to see her as anything except what she was, a person. A woman who had once been frightened and saved and who still carried the memory of that moment. Before she could answer, one of her guards approached. "Your Majesty, this attack was no random raid. Their ships bore hidden markings. I believe this was an assassination attempt." The word spread unease through the villagers who overheard. Serelith's eyes narrowed. "Assassins here?" "Yes," the guard said quietly. "Someone wants you dead." Elias gave a dry laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Seems some things never change. You've been a target since the day I found you." Her gaze turned sharp. "And yet I still live." Elias studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "That says something. The settlement could no longer provide safety. The Queen's presence drew danger, and her enemies would not stop with one failed attempt. She knew it, and Elias knew it too. The only question was what came next. That night, beneath the stars of Heron's Reach, Serelith went to speak with him. He sat near a low fire outside the settlement, fixing a broken rifle with steady hands. The villagers gave him space, treating him like a protector, though he never asked for their respect. She stepped into the circle of firelight, her cloak trailing behind her. He looked up, meeting her eyes without surprise. "You came alone," he said. "I do not fear you," she answered. "You shouldn't," he said simply. He tightened a screw on the rifle, then set it aside. "So why are you here, Serelith?" She paused at the sound of her name. It had been years since she had heard it spoken without title or weight. To her court she was Majesty. To her people she was the Iron Queen. To him she was still only Serelith. "I came because I heard whispers of a man who would not bow," she said. "A man who defended the helpless without thought of reward. I came to see if he was real, or only a story told by frightened raiders. And I found you." Elias leaned back slightly, staring into the fire. "You shouldn't have come. A queen doesn't belong here." "Perhaps not," she admitted. "But I am here. And what I saw today proves that the man who once saved me has not changed." He turned to her then, his eyes hard. "Why does it matter to you? You have an empire to rule. You have armies, fleets, councils. What does one man matter?" Her breath caught, but she did not look away. "Because that one man chose mercy over orders. Because that one man reminded me, long ago, that trust is not weakness. And because, Elias Corin, I have not forgotten you." The fire crackled between them. For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly he shook his head. "I'm no hero, Serelith. I made a choice. That's all. And yet that choice changed everything," she whispered. Before more could be said, one of her guards ran up, breathless. "Your Majesty, we found proof among the raiders' remains. They were supplied by Zithran hands. Someone within the Empire is feeding your enemies." Her blood chilled. Betrayal from within. It was no longer just rumor, it was real. She turned to Elias, her mind racing. He read her expression and gave a tired smile. "Looks like your own people want you gone. Can't say I'm surprised. Thrones attract knives." Serelith's voice was steel. "Then I must find the traitors. I cannot fight this alone." She expected him to refuse, to walk away as he had walked from the Terran fleet years ago. But instead, Elias rose to his feet, the firelight catching the scars on his face, the years etched into his features. "I'll help," he said quietly. "But not because you're queen, not because of your throne. I'll help because I've seen what happens when people let fear and betrayal spread unchecked. And because I gave you my word a long time ago that I wouldn't let you fall." Her heart stirred at the words, though she kept her face calm. She had not expected him to still hold to that promise, not after all the years, not after all he had lost. "Then we will face this together," she said. He gave a short nod. "On my terms. I don't answer to crowns, only to what's right." She almost smiled. Almost. "You never did change." The night stretched on, but something had shifted. For years, Serelith had ruled with walls around her heart, with duty as her only companion. Now, standing beside Elias once more, she felt those walls tremble. The galaxy was dangerous, her throne threatened. But for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. Far away, in the dark halls of the Gytheran court, conspirators whispered of plans and power. They thought the queen stood vulnerable, isolated. They thought her end was near, but they did not yet know that the human who once risked everything for her had returned to her side. The palace halls of Zythera were filled with whispers, though Queen Serelith did not hear them directly. Conspiracies never spoke in the open. They lived in shadows, behind closed doors, and coded messages and hidden gestures, but she felt the weight of them pressing closer with every passing day. Elias had come with her, though not as a subject or bodyguard. He made that clear the moment they returned to the capital. He walked beside her, not behind. He looked at generals and advisors as equals, not as untouchable nobles. Some of her council despised him for it. Some feared him. But all of them noticed. Saralith herself felt the shift most of all. With Elias near, she remembered who she had once been. Not the Iron Queen who carried the burden of millions, but the woman who had once stood in ruins, frightened yet alive because a human had refused to abandon her. His presence reminded her that she was more than the crown, more than the throne. But his presence also drew danger. The conspirators, whoever they were, now had two targets, and unlike her, Elias had no empire to protect him. He walked into danger armed only with his stubborn will and the quiet strength that had never left him. The first attack came 3 nights after their return. A squad of assassins slipped into the palace gardens under the cover of darkness. They were silent, quick, trained to kill without hesitation, but Elias was awake. He had never grown used to the comfort of soft beds or quiet nights. His instincts had kept him alive too many times before, and they stirred now as he heard the faint scrape of metal on stone. By the time the assassins reached the Queen's chambers, Elias was waiting in the shadows. The fight was brutal, swift, and silent. He moved with the efficiency of a soldier who had survived too many wars, striking hard and without hesitation. When it was over, 3 assassins lay dead among the flowers and 1 lay bound at his feet. Saralith arrived with her guards moments later. Her eyes widened at the sight. Elias stood with blood on his sleeve, breathing hard but steady. He looked at her, his voice calm. "They're yours. One of your own houses sent them." The bound assassin confirmed it under questioning. A noble family, long resentful of Saralith's rise, had allied with others in secret. Their goal was simple: remove her and install a ruler who would bend to their will. Her council raged at the news, demanding vengeance, demanding executions. But Saralith listened only to Elias, who spoke quietly as the council argued. "You can't kill shadows with fire. Cut off 1 head, 2 more rise. You need proof. You need to show your people the truth." She looked at him, studying his worn face, his steady eyes. "And how do you suggest I do that?" "Expose them," he said. "Not in secret, not with whispers. Make their betrayal impossible to deny. Drag it into the light where no one can look away." It was a reckless plan, and her council opposed it fiercely. But Saralith had learned long ago that Elias's recklessness often carried a strange wisdom. Against their protests, she agreed. Together they began to move quietly, carefully, gathering evidence of the conspiracy. Elias walked places no noble dared to go, into the alleys of the capital, the smuggler docks, the lower markets where soldiers drank and spoke too freely. He listened, asked questions, pieced together threads others ignored. Saralith did the same within the palace, sifting through coded messages, suspicious meetings, and financial ledgers. The work was dangerous. More than once, Elias caught spies following him, and more than once he fought them off in silent alleys. He carried new scars for it, but he never complained. Through it all, Saralith saw how he moved, how he lived. He ate little, slept less, and trusted no one but her. He had built a life on survival, and though years had passed, that life had not left him. She admired it, but it pained her too. He deserved more than endless battles. One night, as they studied stolen documents in her private chamber, she asked him quietly, "Why do you still fight for me? You owe me nothing now. You could leave. Disappear again." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Because I made a choice once, and I don't take back choices." Her voice softened. "Even if it cost you everything?" He gave a faint, tired smile. "It already did. And I'm still here." The word struck her deeply. She said nothing more, but her heart stirred in ways she could not ignore. At last the pieces came together. The conspiracy was larger than she had feared. Several noble houses, high-ranking generals, even a few members of her own council were involved. They had hidden their treachery well, but the proof was undeniable now. Saralith called for a gathering in the grand hall of the capital. Every noble, every general, every council member was summoned. The hall filled with whispers, with suspicion, with unease. The conspirators believed she suspected nothing. When the Queen entered, Elias walked beside her. Gasps filled the hall at his presence. A human standing at the side of their queen, facing nobles with no bow, no fear. It was unthinkable. It was blasphemy to some, but Sarilith let them see it. She wanted them to. She spoke with a voice of steel, her words echoing through the chamber. She laid out the proof piece by piece, document by document, confession by confession. Gasps turned to outrage, outrage turned to panic. The conspirators denied, shouted, tried to twist the truth. But then Elias stepped forward. He held up a data crystal, one he had stolen himself from the smuggler docks. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the hall. This is their deal. Weapons, credits, and blood. Paid for by your own nobles. Sent to the raiders who tried to kill your queen. I found it. I bled for it, and now it's here for all of you to see. The hall fell silent. The conspirators had no escape. Their betrayal stood exposed, undeniable. Sarilith turned to her people, her voice strong. This is what treachery looks like. Not humans, not Terrans, not outsiders, our own. And yet, she paused, her eyes sweeping the hall. A human stood for me again when my own kind tried to end me. Remember this. Remember who we are and who they are. The nobles bowed their heads, some in shame, some in fear. The conspirators were seized, dragged away to face judgment. The hall shook with the weight of what had been revealed. When it was over, Sarilith stood tall, her crown gleaming, her empire still hers. But as the hall emptied, she looked at Elias. He stood as he always did, quiet, steady, refusing to bask in the moment. You changed the course of my empire again, she said softly. He shook his head. I just did what needed to be done. She smiled faintly, the first true smile she had shown in years. And that is why you matter. The conspirators had been defeated, but Sarilith knew the battle was not over. Shadows would always return, knives would always seek her back. But she also knew this. She was not alone anymore. And deep within, she felt something she had not felt since she first wore the crown. Hope. The conspirators had been unmasked, dragged away in chains before the eyes of the Empire. The nobles had seen their shame, the people had heard their lies, and for a moment it seemed that Queen Sarilith's throne was safe again. Yet both she and Elias knew the truth. Shadows never die so easily. The conspiracy had been deep, and its roots ran farther than they had uncovered. The Empire was restless in the days that followed. Armies whispered of betrayal, merchants feared the strength of the throne, and rumors spread like wildfire. It was in those days that Sarilith felt the greatest test of her rule was still ahead. She had shown her people proof, but now she had to show them something stronger: unity, courage, and the will to endure. Elias stayed close, though never like a servant. He walked beside her as if he belonged there, though everyone in the palace knew he did not. Nobles glared at him, guards muttered behind his back, but no one dared move against him. They had seen what he had done in the Grand Hall. They had seen that he could not be broken, yet even Elias could not stop what came next. It began with silence in the capital. Ships that should have returned from patrols did not. Messages from outer colonies failed to arrive. And then, on the 7th night after the conspirators' capture, the alarms sounded. A fleet approached, dozens of ships carrying the banners of rebellion. The conspirators had not acted alone. Their allies had gathered strength beyond the capital, and now they came with fire. The council panicked. Some cried for retreat, some for surrender, others for desperate measures. Sarilith stood among them, her face calm though her heart pounded like thunder. She remembered her father's lessons, remembered the weight of her crown, but above all she remembered Elias's words. Expose them. Face them. Stand. So she stood. They will come for me, she told her council. They will think to end me and place a puppet on this throne, but they will not succeed. I will face them here in the heart of the Empire, and the people will see who truly leads them. The council was silent. None dared argue, for in her voice was iron. When the rebels' fleet broke orbit, battle consumed the skies. The capital shook with fire, shields crackling, turrets roaring, the heavens alive with destruction. From the palace walls, Sarilith and Elias watched as the Empire itself fought for survival. But the battle was not only in space. Raiders and rebel soldiers broke through defenses, pouring into the streets. The palace became a fortress under siege, its great halls echoing with the clash of steel and the roar of weapons. Through it all, Elias fought at Sarilith's side. He moved with the same fierce resolve she had seen on Vera 9 years ago, when he had lifted her from the wreckage. His rifle sang, his blade struck, his voice rallied guards who might have broken. He fought as if no fear could touch him. And as she watched him, Saralith felt something shift in her heart. He was not one of her kind. His life was shorter, his strength finite, his years already etched into his face. But in that moment, he was more than any general, more than any noble. He was the reminder of what humanity could be. Defiant, unyielding, unwilling to bow to fate. The rebels pressed hard, their numbers vast. The palace gates buckled under their assault. Saralith's guards fell one by one, though not without taking enemies with them. At last, the gates gave way and the rebels poured into the throne hall. At their head was a noble who had escaped the purge, a man who had once sworn loyalty to Saralith but now raised his blade against her. "This empire is weak," he cried. "It will fall unless ruled by those who understand strength. You are unfit to wear the crown, and you—" His eyes cut to Elias standing firm at Saralith's side. "You are nothing but an animal from a lesser world. Your presence here is an insult to our blood." Elias gave a low laugh, bitter but calm. "Funny thing about blood. It spills the same color, no matter whose veins it comes from." The noble roared, charging forward with his soldiers. The battle became chaos. Steel clashed, plasma burned, screams filled the hall. Elias fought with everything he had. Every strike a defiance, every step a stand against the tide. He was cut, battered, pushed back, but he refused to fall. At last, the noble broke through the guards and faced Saralith directly. His blade arced toward her crown, but Elias was there, throwing himself between them. The strike cut deep into his shoulder, driving him to his knees. Blood stained the marble floor, but still he rose, forcing the noble back with sheer will. "Not today," Elias growled, his voice low but filled with fire. Something in his defiance broke the moment. The guards who remained surged forward, inspired by the sight of a single human refusing to bow, refusing to die, refusing to let their queen fall. Their courage ignited like flame, and together they drove the rebels back. The noble fell, his rebellion broken, his soldiers scattering as the Empire's loyalists pressed their counterattack. One by one, the rebels were forced out of the capital, back into the void, their fleet shattered and their cause destroyed. When silence finally returned to the throne hall, it was heavy, broken only by the sound of Elias's uneven breathing. He stood still, leaning on his weapon, his face pale but his eyes unbroken. Saralith rushed to him, her hands reaching to steady him. For a moment, queen and crown meant nothing. She was simply Saralith again, and he was Elias, the man who had once saved her, who had just saved her again. "You should not have done that," she whispered, her voice shaking. He gave a faint smile. "You know me better than that." Her golden eyes burned with unshed tears, but she held them back. She could not show weakness here, not before the guards, not before the Empire. Instead, she straightened, her voice strong as it carried through the hall. "Remember this day," she declared. "Remember that it was not nobles who saved your queen, not generals, not fleets. It was a human, a man who stood when others would fall. Let all of you remember what courage truly looks like." The hall echoed with her words. The guards, battered and bloodied, lifted their blades in salute. And though Elias stood weary, bleeding, scarred, they looked at him with awe. In the days that followed, peace returned. The rebellion was crushed, its leaders executed or exiled, its roots torn out. The empire grew quiet again, but it was not the same as before. Stories spread of the human who had fought beside the queen, who had stood alone against a tide of enemies, who had bled so that the empire might live. Elias himself asked for nothing. He refused titles, refused wealth, refused command. When Saralith offered him honors before her people, he only shook his head. "I don't need any of that," he told her. "I just need to know you'll keep fighting for what's right." She looked at him, her heart heavy with words she could not say. "And if I falter? Then I'll remind you," he said simply. Years had passed since the storm world where their paths first crossed. But as Saralith looked at him now, she knew the truth. Elias Corrin had changed her life, changed her empire, changed her people's view of humans forever. He was not one of her kind, not bound to her by blood or law. Yet he was bound by something stronger, the unshakable choice he had made long ago, the choice never to let her fall. And so, when the stars burned bright over the capital and the empire began to heal once more, Queen Saralith allowed herself a quiet truth. one she would never share with anyone but him. Years later, she had seen him again, the human who had once risked everything for her. And in the end, he had risked it all again.